Yes, I think there's a question. Caroline, the Kelly Factory. I'd like to add that in this kind of conferences, I'd like to see companies which manufacture accessible products, because I think they would have a lot to learn. That's a good point. Next time we will try to invite them in. We will drag them in if necessary. It is difficult because if something manufactures something, well, convincing them to come to a conference where they can be criticized is not easy. But I think that it would be a very healthy policy. And also those who do not think as we do have their own reasons. I'm sure that their reasons are not always well justified, but we need to listen to them and also to make contact, because very often the problem that we have in the industry is not a matter of productivity of market, because out of ignorance or for lack of knowledge. And well, introducing these elements later on is much more expensive and much more costly. This is something that we know with software, about software for many years. Fixing something is tremendously more expensive than taking a product which works properly or a part. This is what we do we see in many of the solutions. But of course, if the solution is not built with a concept of accessibility for all, it will be difficult. Of course, it's more difficult to fix when things have not been done properly from the beginning. Very often when we need to do an update of our screen reader, mobile speak, we need to rewrite the 40% of our program's code, just to give you an idea. I'd like to say something. I don't think that there's so many companies who make their products inaccessible consciously. I'm afraid that they're not aware of the fact that a person with a visual disability needs to make a phone call, or a person on a wheelchair wants to go to university, or that a person with a mental disability wants to have some leisure time. So we're not aware of that in general. They're not aware of that. They're not aware of the fact that we are diverse and that there's people that work in different ways. So it's not that the bad is in the movie. I think that the lack of knowledge and the lack of sensibility is to blame. And I think that we should perhaps recruit companies and organize perhaps a workshop in the next edition with companies which are not necessarily linked to accessibility, and treat them really well, take them for lunch, go to a flamenco show or something. So attract them somehow so that they feel comfortable, and so that they hear our viewpoint and we hear what their opinion is, because we probably need to learn from them how to sell our ideas, how to convince, being aware of what you said before, that the problems that companies have, especially smaller companies, to know what accessibility is about and how to implement accessibility. Anything else, Miguel? Come on. Well, if there's a question, we'd rather hear the question. Yes. As Karin was saying, the companies need to be present, and I'm a director of a small company which deals with dependency, and perhaps that asking the companies to take on all this risk And this, based on the principle that we all agree with that. After the law on dependency was introduced in 2007, which we all thought would be a great opportunity to speak about, for example, accessibility, prevention, or promotion of autonomy. As it happens, when the law was developed, the promotion of autonomy was practically set aside. It's very difficult for companies to try to incorporate added value to products and services which the law then sets aside, so that the product cannot be sold. So this is perhaps a desperate call, but I'd like to remind you that there's people out there, but if we do not use the legislation appropriately, then we won't be going anywhere. If we only concentrate on larger companies which can make an added value and make this technology accessible to the population massively, is virtually impossible under the present circumstances. Yes, perhaps just one more comment. At the beginning, you were saying that we should perhaps transfer this risk to the companies. But whenever we speak about business, there's always risk and opportunity involved. And there's a very single risk. David, for example, has been following all this discussion with his iPad. None of us here have a portable PC. There's blogs, there's an iPad, and I don't know whether you realize that what the companies have done is buy smaller companies which have developed the technology. So I agree when we say that we all take on a risk, but it's also a great opportunity if you are you merge with a larger company in order to generate a market share which gives you an opportunity. Not only an opportunity, but also a means of making a difference. And I agree with the minorities, what Jaime was saying, that the blind tend to speak long times on the phone. But I think there's very few products with how many blind people do we have in Spain? How many deaf? How many people in wheelchairs? So it's not necessary to go towards a very specific support product, but always taking into account design for all, but a design that will be tailor-made so that the users have the possibility of using these services. Universities will have the opportunity of incorporating these services in our curricula, because at the end of the day, academia is also competing. Why does a student choose to go to the UNED or to Carlos III or to Madrid Polytechnic University? The first decision might be it's because it's the one which I have closer. But a second decision might be based on the fact that, well, Miguel Ángel has a digital home, or because Jaime has in Paris a specific master's degree. So that for everything there's a risk, but also an opportunities. And for us, we have the opportunity to incorporate new degrees, new master's degrees, and it's a possibility for companies to also sell more products. We should bear in mind that the population is aging at a faster and faster pace. There's more and more older people. The problem is not that they are old, but the problem is arthritis, back pain, the fact that they cannot move, so that there is market niches that are emerging, and the opportunities for universities and companies. And of course we have a legislation which would be abided by, but it's also a potential to attract new students or new clients. And this is indeed very interesting. If there are any other questions, may I suggest that you put them to us during coffee break, because we'll all be there. So if any of you have any further questions, we'll be there. And then we have a next session on teleassistance at noon. Goodbye.